This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. So 2 bits of news dropped today that I thought was interesting. I want to go over. One, the Browns got a interesting report card back from the Nflpa. I always think when this comes out, it's an interesting thing to look at, to see what needs to be improved behind the scenes, and to see how much of, well, how some of the stuff behind the scenes can sometimes trickle into what you see, on the football field. Another thing that happened was that Denzel Ward got a restructure, and we'll talk about that first, briefly go over this. Again, not really much of a surprise for people who've been following the channel. We've talked about the Denzel Ward restructure basically being an inevitability because of how his contract is structured. Similar thoughts to the possibility of Deshaun Watson's contract being restructured. One of the things that Kevin said in his press conference, which I'm going to elaborate more in tomorrow morning's video where I go over Kevin's press conference. But one of the things that Kevin said in his press conference that they're going over to meet with Deshaun Watson and not talk about football. Obviously, you can't talk about football with your coaches in the offseason or else you break the CBA. But they probably, but so they're going to go there to not talk about football, not talk about business. I also wouldn't be surprised if just coincidentally around that time, a restructure surfaces in the news or something like that. I think this is just them getting eyes on Deshaun, making sure that he's recovering well, making sure that everything that they're hearing from his team on the medical side is going well, and just kind of just being able to shoot the stuff with him and get a vibe check with everybody. So I think pretty soon after that trip, we'll see the restructure come out. Browns are at like $4 million in cap space right now, and with the restructure, so they're in the positive. And then if they restructure, then not Denzel, they restructure Deshaun Watson, that frees up another $30 million. And then if you do things like make a decision on whether you want to keep Jed, if you want to keep Jed for this year, you will restructure him, bring that number down. You could also restructure a number of guys, work out something with Nick Chubb. The Browns have multiple avenues to lower their cap number. And it's why we talk about on this channel how the cap is manipulatable or manipulate. You can manipulate the cap basically. And be able to move things around. And it behooves you, as long as you have a owner who's willing to spend cash, to do that, because money today is more expensive than money tomorrow, which means the cap percentages change, right? $10 million might be 7% of the cap this year, but if you restructure the contract and move that down, and then you end up adding $2-3 million to the cap number next year, but you save that $3 million on the cap number this year, yes, you will be paying more. You will be paying that guy $14 million. Well, not paying him. The cap number for that player will be $14 million next year. But it's also important to remember that the cap's going to go up, and $14 million might be 6% of $270 million. And basically, you end up saving cap space that way. So whenever you hear people talk about restructures, but they don't mention that the cap goes up in the percentages that they're talking about it's kind of hard to gauge what the reality of that is. Browns going to restructure Denzel Ward's contract. They have, I think, void years out to 2029 on that contract. So they got plenty of room to play around with that. And I think that they'll use that contract to its full ability. Same thing with Deshaun Watson. Myles Garrett has like these auto restructures in his contract. Again, just check out Jack Duffin if you really want to like have a understanding of what the Browns cap issues could be and what they aren't. He is the best person to get that information from. So make sure you check out Jack. He basically studies this thing 24/7. One of the best out there. So that's Denzel Ward's restructure. Nothing crazy there. Nothing mind blowing there when it comes to that news breaking. We know that the Browns are going to try to free up some space. Again, expect the Browns to try to get to about $60 million in cap space, maybe 50 to 60, and expect them to have a free agency budget of about $30 million in cap hits for this year. That doesn't mean that they will only spend $30 million in cash, though. That just means they will take in $30 million in cap hits for this year. That will be what they're willing to do. Their cash budget could be different depending, again, on how they structure these contracts and how they layer the cap hits over the years. So a $30 million cap hit budget, but probably a much higher cash budget than that, if I'm being honest. So let's get to this report card now that we got some of the salary cap stuff out the way. And this report card was interesting. It comes out every year. It's really made waves these last couple of years. I think it's been made available to the public, or they've just been doing it the last couple of years. If you just want to know some raw overall grades from this thing, I'll bring it up here, right? This is the Browns overall report card. So you can see treatment of facilities, treatment of families, my bad, D-. There's good reason for that. Food and cafeteria, C+. Nutrition, dietitian, C+. Locker room, D+. Training room, C+. Training staff, B-. Weight room, D. Strength coach, D. Team travel, D. Head coach, B-. Ownership, B. We'll get into the explanations of all of these grades. The two that I found most interesting to look at were head coach and the grade for the weight room, which is among one of the worst in the NFL. We'll get to why that is. I think those two grades kind of need some context. But let's kind of just jump into these grades, right? The treatment of family. Basically, the Browns don't have the most modern of facilities. They built the Berea training facility they have right now. It's been renovated a ton, but there's only but so much space. You need to have room for the two football fields, and then you need to have room for the facility itself. And that facility, if you've never been to it in Berea, is kind of locked in to a neighborhood. There are a lot of houses, property that exist there. So it's not as easy to expand. Like you got to probably, like you could do it. You could destroy people's houses and use the government and all that to have it happen. But you got to do a lot of work for that. And I don't know if it's worth it for the Browns to do that. It's in a weird, awkward spot. Like you look at a lot of other teams' facilities, they're kind of just in the middle of nowhere. Like the one that stands out to me is Baltimore's, where they just have, it's a castle in the middle of the forest, basically. It's one of the most secluded places. It's hard to believe you're in the Baltimore metropolitan area when you go to the Ravens facility. It's weird. Google map it if you've never seen it, but it's out in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes these are built like more in commercial areas, so that if you need more land, it's a little bit easier because these people are here for commercial. Residentially zoned places are a little bit more difficult. It's all governmental red tape. That's not what you come here for. But, you know, the Browns basically, they need new facilities, I think, is the thing. And I think this is why they're doing things like buying land across from the airport and trying to see what they could do with the stadium, because it's obvious to me that we have reached a point to where all of the stuff that we built initially for this team in the 4-year absence that they had from 96 to 99, all that stuff's aging. The stadium is aging. It's not bad, but it is aging. And there are some things even a renovation can't really fix about the stadium because those issues are logistical, not necessarily, physical. And the training facility stuff, again, it's a lot of logistical stuff that's wrong with the building that they just got to be able to fix by either doing a major expansion or just building another building. Now, they can't build another building in Berea, I think, till 2029 or something like that, or 2039. Like, they signed a very long-term contract with the city of Berea, and maybe they'll be flexible if you could build it other places in Berea. But I don't think that they bought that whole Brook Park area to build another training facility. That's way too much land for a training facility. For those of you who think that's why they bought that area in Brook Park, that's definitely for a stadium. But treatment of families, they're one of 12 teams that don't provide player families with a family room at the stadium. Again, it's a capacity thing, so the stadium has but so many suites. They want to sell those suites to make their money back. All this stuff means that they don't have dedicated family rooms for the teams. They could kick out somebody out of a suite, not sell it, and then have that, but they trying to save some money here, I guess. They do provide daycare at the stadium for home games, which is pretty good. A lot of teams don't have that. The two main issues is that the family meetup area is a tent in the parking lot, which is rough in the winter weather. Sucks, especially when you think about where that parking lot is at Cleveland Browns Stadium and the fact that it's not just bad weather, lake effect bad weather. So I imagine it's got to be awful in that tent. I mean, like, at least you have the tent. And I'm not saying they should be grateful for the tent, but like, the weather's bad and the rain's sideways, so the tent might as well not be there. Yeah, I can see why people will be mad about this because it's not a great situation. Also can see where the team's hands are tied because it's part of the issue is the location. They would much rather just have like a underground garage, like a very large underground garage, but instead it's a lot. Can't renovate that into the stadium, right? You got to build a new stadium if that's something that you want. Early in the season, team was not allowing players who have been carted off the field with significant injury to contact wives or loved ones from the locker room to let them know how they're doing. I have no idea why they would restrict that. That's a weird one. Why were they restricting that? It's weird. Food and cafeteria, they rank 19th in food taste. About average, who cares? They rank 19th in food freshness, about average, who cares? More than half the players notice improved variety, taste, and quantity. Good to know that the food tastes good there. Nutrition, dietitian, they feel like it's fine. C+, it's middle of the pack. A lot of teams are basically log jam in the middle here. That's fine. Locker room, again, this is a issue of facility. Right? 61% of the players feel like the locker room is big enough. So that's cool. Like, they feel like the locker room's big enough. Only 61% feel that way. So almost half don't. About 30% of the players don't feel like they have enough room for individual lockers. This is a space issue. The players' most common complaint about their locker room is that it's too small. It's a space issue. You could renovate and fix this. I don't know what the logistics are at Cleveland Browns Stadium. This is something they've been complaining about for years. It'll probably happen. It'll probably happen. Training room. Another facility thing where the Browns don't rank the highest. 84% of the team doesn't feel like they have enough full-time trainers. So they feel like the team needs to hire more trainers, which is interesting. Only 75% of the players feel like they have enough full-time physical therapists. 81% of the players feel like they have enough hot tub space. I wonder how that 81 divides. Like, is the 81% that feels like they have enough hot tub space, are those the bigger guys because nobody like gets near them because they're giant? Or is that the smaller guys who get crammed up? I'm willing to bet a lot of kickers, punters, and wide receivers in that 20% of don't feel like we got enough space, right? Big football players have a way of feeling comfortable in hot tubs, in cold tubs that smaller players usually don't. Several players feel like the training room is understaffed. Their top request is additional training and physical therapists. I wonder how much of that also has to do with the sheer amount of people that were injured this year. Like, I wonder if this would have been different if the Browns would have had a regular amount of injured players. And if they had a regular amount of injured players, would they feel like they weren't understaffed at that spot when it comes to trainers? Because when you have 26%, like a bunch of players on IR, it's probably going to stretch your training staff very thin, no matter how standard your amount of trainers is. I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think that had a lot to do with why the players felt like they didn't have enough trainers. So maybe the Browns need to do stuff where they have some guys and ladies on call to be like kind of overflow physical therapists and trainers. In the case that you get a rash of injuries like last year and you need more and more people, because I can imagine if you don't have people who are kind of on call, that when you do need more, it's very hard to do because it's not a job where you can just hire somebody in a couple weeks and let them start. This is a job that takes a while. Like by the time these guys get ready, if they're hired mid-season to actually do the job, I mean, you're talking about like a month passing by at the very least. Training staff, they say 80% of the team feels like they get enough one-on-one overall treatment. Players feel like the training staff moderately contributes to the success. So the training staff, I know a lot of people want the training staff fired after all the injuries. I always think when people like get super reactionary like that and the team gets a bunch of injuries and they want somebody fired for injuries, I think it's silly, especially in football, because it's just football, man. Like people gonna get injured, and sometimes you just gonna have a bad luck year where you get a ton of them in one year. There's really nothing you can do about it. I don't think that there's anything that the trainers could have done to avoid all those injuries, because these injuries weren't sustained working out. These injuries were sustained by playing football, and football is dangerous. So it's good to see the training staff got a decent enough grade here. The weight room, we know that this weight room is an issue. The Browns have had their weight room also be their indoor facility, and they did this during COVID, but they never went back to what the weight room was, and I'm wondering why. Like, did a renovation make that impossible? Either way, I think Kevin announced in his press conference that they're going to be changing that and fixing that this off season, which good. But again, it tells you about the weird constraints that they have in that current facility in Berea, that they couldn't just space out normally during the pandemic, that they had to like resort to these kind of things during the pandemic and then could not revert back. Like they don't really have the most space. And even, I don't know if any of you guys ever been inside the indoor part of the Browns facility. It's not a whole football field. So what ends up happening is that like half of this half football field is taken up by the weight room, and you're really practicing on like 30, 35 yards of turf. It's not great. It really is not great. And again, it's the size concerns. Well, it's not the size concerns. It's the size restrictions that you're running into with that current facility. And again, I think this factors into why the Browns, one, want to build a new stadium, and two, want to build that stadium about 5-10 minutes away from where their main facility is in Berea, because I think also what's going to be in that new stadium is new facilities, right? They will have a new weight room in there. They might have a new media center in there. They might have some of the things that they don't have enough space in Berea to do. They might use the new stadium for and built those facilities into the stadium. Also, you'd have to imagine that the stadium can also be somewhere you can go when you have inclement weather, assuming that stadium is domed. So you read this report, man, and it just screams that they're probably building a new stadium. That's my biggest takeaway. Spoiler warning. Strength coaches, they feel fine about the strength coaches. They like the strength coaches. Team travel, 23rd. They feel like they have a comfortable amount of personal space during flights. So they didn't love the Browns flight situation. They'll probably have to upgrade that soon. And they are one of 7 teams that require players to have a roommate the night before the game. I don't know if this is cost savings or if this is like a team bonding exercise. Is what it is. Like, I don't think that's a deal breaker for a free agent. And if it is, they will make accommodations for certain players if they're of the caliber. And then head coach, this is the one that's probably gonna get the most clicks, is the head coach grade being what, 20A, a B minus, only 70%. Only 70% of players feel like that head coach is efficient with their time. It's all high percentages. Like, I haven't seen anything below 50, like in any of these report cards. So, keep in mind, they're shooting for a very high percentage here, right? They're shooting for like 90% of like people are happy. Players feel like Kevin Stefanski is somewhat willing to listen to them in the locker room, ranked 23rd overall. This grade, because we saw like Bill Belichick had like an F minus. This grade to me is more of a barometer of coaching styles, right? If you are a player friendly, like a player's coach, quote unquote, you're probably going to grade high in these things. We saw Mike Tomlin, who's known as a player's coach, get like an A grade. If you're not known as a player's coach and you're on the other end of that spectrum, like a Bill Belichick, where you're known as disciplinarian, you're probably going to get horrible grades here. And if you're somewhere in the middle there, you're probably going to get, a B minus, B grade there. I think this is all kind of standard. And when you take it into context, not really a concern. But yeah, that's where Kevin's grade is as head coach there. Ownership gets a B grade. And this is basically, do we think you're going to take our concerns seriously and do something about them? And Jimmy Haslam is apparently willing to spend the money there. There were some interesting things. Like, let's go to Pittsburgh's report card. If we're interested in this sort of thing. And Pittsburgh, man, they have some interest. Like, their facilities are getting an F minus here. Their locker rooms are getting an F. Coach got an A. Ownership got an F, which is interesting because, like, how long in Cleveland did we hear about how we need to be more like Pittsburgh when it comes to ownership? And now we live in a world where Pittsburgh is getting one of the worst grades when it comes to ownership. They don't feel like he's going to be serious about his willingness to invest in these facilities. And look, as the league gets further and further away from people who own these teams at its inception and more into people who bought these teams with a bunch of money, you're going to start to see stuff like this happen to the more mom and pop teams, right? The Mark Davises, the Mike Browns, and the Rooney families of it all, because they just don't have the money to throw at this team, or at least the liquid assets to throw at their football teams that somebody like Jimmy Haslam has, who kind of bought the team. It's not really his main source of wealth or his main asset in his portfolio. When it comes to his financials, it's just a thing that he likes to do. The Baltimore Ravens, they graded one of the highest in the NFL. I always say this, people get mad when I say this. The Baltimore Ravens do things well, especially when it comes to organizational things, especially when it comes to this kind of stuff. They're always going to grade well. They have beautiful facilities, all of these things. They really, like, after Rooney lost the team and Bisciotti bought it, he's really been doing an excellent job with that kind of stuff. And the Bengals here, they didn't grade out well in a lot of areas. Treatment of family was horrible last year. They're dead last this year. They're dead last in food because they still they still close for dinner and don't like charge or something ridiculous that they do. Nutrition, they don't really think that the nutrition's any good, which is shocking to get an F minus there. Locker room's bad. They like the head coach, and they think ownership's willing to do stuff about it, which is fair because Mike Brown has built some new things. Like, they built the practice bubble over the last couple of years. They also made some improvements to the indoor facilities there in Cincinnati, but that's just kind of an overview of the rest of the AFC North to see where they're at. But that's the Browns report card. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.